Caylee Anthony, the trial that shook the whole nation. Few cases in modern American history have sparked as much public outrage, media frenzy, and legal debate as the disappearance and death of Caylee Marie Anthony. In the summer of 2008, what began as a missing persons case quickly escalated into a horrific crime investigation when the body of a 2-year-old girl was found discarded in the woods near her home in Orlando, Florida. At the center of this tragedy was Caylee's mother, Caylee Anthony, a young woman whose bizarre behavior and web of lies made her a prime suspect in what would soon become one of the most controversial murder trials in U.S. history. The prosecution portrayed Caylee as a self-absorbed party girl who murdered her own child simply to reclaim a carefree, responsibility-free lifestyle. The defense countered with a shocking claim: Caylee's death was an accident that Caylee's father helped cover up. The jury's verdict: not guilty. This decision sent shockwaves across the nation, leaving millions furious and demanding justice for Caylee. How did the evidence unfold? Why was Caylee acquitted despite overwhelming suspicion? And where is she now? In this deep dive, we'll unravel the entire story, from the early life of Caylee Anthony, the horrific search for Caylee, the trial that divided the country, and Caylee's shocking re-emergence on social media in 2025. Buckle up. This is the Caylee Anthony case, like you've never heard it before. Caylee Anthony's early life, the making of a liar. To understand how Caylee Anthony became the most hated woman in America, we need to go back to the beginning. Born on March 19, 1986, in Warren, Ohio, Caylee Marie Anthony was the daughter of George and Cindy Anthony. The Anthony family appeared to be a normal middle-class household, but behind closed doors, dysfunction, control, and deception were the norm. Her father, George Anthony, was a former police officer turned security guard. Her mother, Cindy Anthony, was a nurse who was described as strong-willed and domineering. Caylee had an older brother, Lee, who played a minor role in the case but was also questioned in legal proceedings. From a young age, Caylee displayed an alarming ability to lie. The first major lie: high school graduation. Caylee's pattern of deception became evident when she was a teenager. In 2004, Caylee's parents were excited to celebrate her high school graduation. They planned a party, invited friends and family, and were ready to watch their daughter walk the stage. But there was a major problem: Caylee never actually graduated. She had been skipping classes and failed to meet graduation requirements, but instead of telling the truth, she pretended everything was fine. Her parents only discovered the lie on the day of the ceremony, when they arrived at the event only to find out that Caylee wouldn't be walking. Rather than admitting her mistakes, Caylee shrugged it off, showing no remorse, a chilling foreshadowing of how she would handle much bigger lies in the future. The mystery of Caylee's father. In 2004, at just 19 years old, Caylee became pregnant, another fact she initially denied. When her belly started to show, she could no longer hide it. Even then, she refused to say who the father was. To this day, Caylee's biological father remains a mystery. Several men were suspected, including Jesse Grund, Caylee's then-fiancé, who later revealed that he was not the father after a paternity test. Jesus Ortiz, a young man who had tragically died in a car accident, and whom Caylee allegedly claimed was the father. Despite multiple claims, no DNA test ever confirmed the true identity of Caylee's father. The birth of Caylee Anthony. On August 9, 2005, Caylee Anthony gave birth to Caylee Marie Anthony. Caylee was a beautiful, vibrant little girl with bright brown eyes and a playful spirit. Despite the initial joy, tensions quickly grew in the Anthony household. Cindy wanted Caylee to give Caylee up for adoption, but Caylee refused. However, she didn't actually want to take care of the child. Instead, Cindy became Caylee's primary caregiver, while Caylee spent her time partying, dating, and lying about having a job. By 2007, Caylee had developed a double life, one where she was a working single mother, and another where she was an unemployed party girl stealing from her own parents. Between 2005 and 2008, Caylee juggled multiple relationships, financial fraud, and deception. She lied about having a full-time job at Universal Studios, but in reality, she had been unemployed for years. She stole thousands of dollars from her parents. Cindy and George were already struggling financially, and Caylee only made things worse. She spent most of her time partying, drinking, and staying at her boyfriend Tony Lazzaro's apartment, all while Cindy and George were the ones actually raising Caylee. The days leading to Caylee's disappearance. In June 2008, tensions erupted in the Anthony home. Cindy threatened to kick Caylee out, demanding she get a real job and take responsibility for Caylee. Casey began making plans to move out, but instead of securing a stable home, she spent more time with her new boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro. On June 9, 2008, Casey and Caylee stayed overnight at Ricardo Morales' house, one of Casey's ex-boyfriends. That was the last time Ricardo ever saw Caylee alive. On June 15, 2008, Cindy took the last known photograph of Caylee while they visited her great-grandfather for Father's Day. The next day, Caylee vanished. June 16, 2008, the last time Caylee was seen alive. At 12:50 p.m., Casey left the house with Caylee, as seen by George Anthony. At 7:54 p.m., Casey was spotted at a Blockbuster video store with her boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro. Caylee was nowhere to be seen. From June 17 to June 23, Casey partied, drank, and entered a hot body contest at a nightclub. She told lie after lie to her parents, claiming that Caylee was with a babysitter named Zani the Nanny. But then, on July 15, 2008, the truth started to unravel. The investigation begins. By July 15, 2008, Caylee Anthony had been missing for 31 days, but no one outside of Casey's inner circle even knew. During that month, Casey told lie after lie to her family and friends about Caylee's whereabouts. She claimed Caylee was with her babysitter, Zani the Nanny. She told friends she was going on a work trip to Tampa. She spent most nights partying at clubs, entering a hot body contest, and staying with her boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro. But Cindy Anthony, the grandmother who had essentially been raising Caylee, was getting suspicious. Casey's car and the horrifying discovery. On July 15, 2008, Cindy and George Anthony received a notice from a local tow yard informing them that Casey's car had been impounded. They went to pick it up, not knowing that what they were about to find would change their lives forever. As soon as they opened the trunk, a sickening smell filled the air. Cindy immediately recognized the odor. She was a nurse. It smelled like death. Cindy Anthony calls 911. Panicked, Cindy immediately called 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked. Cindy Anthony said, I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. The dispatcher was stunned. Cindy went on to explain that her granddaughter had been missing for a month, and that her daughter Casey had refused to tell her where she was. The interrogation begins. Police arrived at the Anthony home that night. Casey acted strangely. She showed little emotion. She was not panicked about Caylee being missing. She insisted that Caylee had been kidnapped by her babysitter, Zani. When detectives pressed her for details, her story began falling apart. For weeks, Casey had told her parents and friends that Caylee was with her nanny, Zenaida Zani Gonzalez. But when police asked her for details, where did Zani live? Casey gave an exact apartment number. What did Zani look like? Casey gave a detailed description. What phone number did Zani use? Casey gave them a fake number. But when detectives investigated further, they discovered something shocking. Zani the nanny never existed. The apartment Casey pointed to had been vacant for months. There were no records of a woman named Zenaida Gonzalez caring for Caylee. The phone number was disconnected. Detectives immediately knew Casey was lying. So, they made their next move, arresting her on the spot. Caylee Anthony was taken into custody for providing false information to law enforcement. But police had a much bigger question. Where was Caylee? The search for Caylee, clues begin to surface. Once Casey was in custody, police intensified their search. Cadaver dogs alert to human decomposition. Detectives brought cadaver dogs to Casey's abandoned car and the Anthony backyard. The dogs immediately alerted to the scent of human decomposition. In Casey's car trunk, the dogs picked up the scent. In the Anthony family's backyard, they alerted again. This was major evidence that a body had been inside Casey's car at some point. Forensic testing reveals more disturbing evidence. Investigators conducted scientific testing on the trunk of Casey's car. What they found was chilling. A single strand of hair in the trunk was found to be Caylee's. Chemical analysis detected high levels of chloroform, a chemical used to render people unconscious. Air samples contained compounds consistent with human decomposition. It was now clear, a dead body had been in Caylee Anthony's car. As detectives dug deeper, They uncovered Casey's internet search history from the months before Caylee vanished. What did she look up? How to make chloroform. Neck breaking. How to make someone unconscious. The evidence was overwhelming. Police believed that Casey had murdered Caylee, possibly by using chloroform to render her unconscious before suffocating her with duct tape. The only thing missing? Caylee's body. 4 months, police and volunteers searched for Caylee. They followed every tip, every clue, but her body remained missing. Then, in December 2008, a man named Roy Kronk, a local meter reader, was walking near a wooded area close to the Anthony home. What he saw would haunt him forever. Peeking out from the underbrush was a tiny skull. Kronk called 911 immediately. When detectives arrived, they found a small skull with duct tape over the mouth, a laundry bag filled with tiny bones, a child's blanket. It was Caylee. On October 14, 2008, Caylee Anthony was formally indicted for first-degree murder. The charges are first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, 4 counts of lying to law enforcement. If convicted, Caylee could face the death penalty. As the trial approached, the entire country was watching. What would the jury decide? Was Caylee Anthony a cold-blooded murderer? Or was she a victim of circumstance? The trial of the century began. By the time Caylee Anthony's trial began on May 24, 2011, it had already become one of the most high-profile court cases in American history. The courtroom was packed with journalists, legal analysts, and spectators eager to see how the prosecution and defense would argue their cases. Millions of people across the country tuned in to watch the live broadcasts, and debates raged about whether Caylee was guilty or if the evidence was circumstantial. The prosecution, led by Jeff Ashton and Linda Drain Burdick, presented overwhelming forensic evidence suggesting that Caylee had murdered her daughter to escape the responsibilities of being a mother. The defense, led by Jose Baez, shocked the courtroom with a completely new theory that changed everything. The prosecution's case: the party girl turned murderer. The prosecution wasted no time in painting Caylee Anthony as a manipulative liar who had only one goal: to live a carefree life without her daughter. They presented a timeline of Caylee's actions during the 31 days Caylee was missing. June 16, 2008. Caylee was last seen alive with Caylee. June 17 to July 15, 2008. Caylee partied at clubs, entered a hot body contest, and stayed with her boyfriend. July 15, 2008. Cindy Anthony called 911, reporting her granddaughter missing and saying Caylee's car smelled like a dead body. Prosecutors then introduced the forensic evidence that tied Caylee to Caylee's disappearance and death. Key evidence presented by the prosecution are the cadaver dogs. 2 separate cadaver dogs alerted to the scent of human decomposition in the trunk of Caylee's car. The dogs also alerted to suspicious areas in the Anthony family's backyard, suggesting a body had been there at some point. The car trunk forensics. Forensic experts testified that a single strand of Caylee's hair was found in the trunk, and it showed signs of decomposition. Chemical analysis detected high levels of chloroform, a substance known to cause unconsciousness. Air samples from the trunk revealed compounds consistent with human decomposition. Internet search history. Investigators uncovered Google searches on Caylee's computer, including how to make chloroform, neck breaking, how to make someone unconscious, duct tape over Caylee's skull. The most disturbing piece of evidence was that Caylee's remains were found with duct tape over her skull. The prosecution argued that Caylee used the tape to suffocate her daughter before disposing of her body in the woods. The prosecution's case was clear. Caylee Anthony had deliberately murdered her daughter to free herself from the burdens of motherhood. The evidence was strong. The public was convinced. Many believed this trial was nothing more than a formality before Caylee received the death penalty. Then the defense dropped a bombshell. Jose Baez, Caylee's lead attorney, stunned the courtroom when he opened his argument with a completely different version of events. According to the defense, Caylee was never murdered. Instead, she had drowned accidentally in the family's swimming pool on June 16, 2008. Baez claimed that Caylee's father, George Anthony, discovered Caylee's lifeless body in the pool, panicked, and helped Caylee cover up the death. This theory shocked everyone. Up until this moment, Caylee had never suggested that Caylee had drowned. She had told police that Caylee was kidnapped by her imaginary babysitter, Zani the nanny. Now, the defense was claiming that Casey had been forced into silence by years of abuse. Baez went even further, accusing George Anthony of sexually abusing Casey since childhood. He suggested that Casey's long history of lying was a result of her father's manipulation and control. He claimed that George had forced Casey to hide the truth about Caylee's death, just as she had been forced to hide years of abuse. He implied that George may have been involved in the disposal of Caylee's body. George Anthony took the stand and vehemently denied all accusations of sexual abuse and any involvement in Caylee's disappearance. The defense presented no physical evidence to support the claim that Caylee had drowned. Despite this, Baez planted enough doubt in the jury's mind to make them question whether Casey was truly a murderer or if she was a victim of lifelong abuse and manipulation. The once clear-cut murder trial had now become a battle of narratives. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury began deliberations on July 4, 2011. They took only 10 hours to reach a decision, a surprisingly short amount of time for a case of this magnitude. On July 5, 2011, the courtroom was silent as the jury's verdict was read. Count 1, first-degree murder, not guilty. Count 2, aggravated child abuse, not guilty. Count 3, aggravated manslaughter of a child, not guilty. Counts 4 to 7, providing false information to law enforcement, guilty. Caylee Anthony was convicted only of lying to police. She was sentenced to 4 years in jail, but because she had already spent 3 years in custody, she was released just 10 days later, on July 17, 2011. As soon as the verdict was announced, the public erupted in outrage. People across the country believed that justice had been denied for Caylee Anthony. Legal experts were stunned by the jury's decision, but the case revealed a harsh reality of the justice system. Without definitive physical evidence proving murder, conviction is nearly impossible. The not guilty verdict sparked protests, heated debates, and national outrage. Polls taken immediately after the trial showed that over 80% of Americans believed Caylee Anthony was guilty. Many compared the case to the O.J. Simpson trial, where a highly publicized trial ended in an acquittal that divided the nation. Protesters outside the courtroom chanted, "Justice for Caylee," expressing their anger over the jury's decision. Caylee Anthony immediately went into hiding after her release. Her parents, George and Cindy Anthony, became the subject of intense media scrutiny, and their relationship with Casey was permanently fractured. In 2017, Caylee Anthony gave an interview where she said, "I sleep pretty good at night." That single sentence reignited public anger, as many saw it as a sign that Casey had no remorse. Caylee Anthony today and the TikTok comeback. Few weeks ago, Caylee Anthony resurfaced in the public eye by launching a TikTok account and newsletter, claiming to be a legal advocate. She announced that she wanted to reintroduce herself, and claimed she had been working in the legal field since 2011. The reaction was swift and brutal. Social media erupted in backlash, with thousands commenting that she should have stayed out of the spotlight. Some questioned why a woman once accused of murdering her child was trying to become a public figure again. Others mocked her attempt at rebranding, calling it a desperate attempt for attention. Final thoughts. To this day, the true circumstances of Caylee Anthony's death remain unknown. Was it a tragic accident? Or did Casey intentionally kill her daughter? The jury made their decision, but the court of public opinion has not forgiven Caylee Anthony. What do you think? The Caylee Anthony trial remains one of the most controversial legal cases in American history. Despite overwhelming public belief in her guilt, the jury ultimately found her not guilty of murder due to a lack of direct evidence. Did the prosecution fail to prove its case, or did Caylee Anthony truly get away with murder? Was the jury right to acquit her, or did the justice system fail Caylee Anthony? What are your thoughts on Caylee Anthony's recent attempt to rebrand herself as a legal advocate? Join the conversation in the comments below. Do you believe Caylee Anthony should have been convicted, or was there reasonable doubt? Let's discuss this case that continues to divide public opinion. If you found this deep dive compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth true crime investigations.